Everybody, week 5 is almost in the books. So, Sam and I want to take some time to be stupid and overreact or underreact to certain things that went on yesterday. And this is being recorded before Monday night, so you won't see anything about tonight's game. But we got a few topics we want to touch on, a few injury updates, and then a little bit of a review of this week in fantasy, and then just a look at the season as a whole, because the season has just been really weird when it comes to fantasy. It just really shows you how you can think you drafted perfectly, but then things just go out the door very quickly. So, first topic I want to address here, and more has come out on this, and some of it is the Browns fans screaming for Watson to be benched. Now, there's a video circulating where it shows Watson walking off the field when Stefanski is clearly in line with wanting to go for it on 4th and short. It's come out that Watson walked off the field because there was too many men on the field and they weren't going to get the play off. That has been proven. Okay. However, I don't think this clears up the fact that Watson has been one of the, if not the worst quarterback in the league this year. And since he's been on the Browns, really, when it comes down to it, he has yet to throw for a game over 200 yards. And it's not like he doesn't have capable of receivers around him. I know the running back core leaves a little bit to be desired when it comes down to it, but not throwing over 200 yards. He's averaging less than 5 yards per attempt and catch. It's not good, and they won't bench him. So, what do you think? Do you think the Browns need to put in Winston at this point?
The Browns should have benched Watson 4 weeks ago, honestly. Look, he's terrible, but they're paying him so much money on that massive guaranteed contract that the Browns are just stuck with him. Yep. I don't even know what the cap implications are for cutting him next year, but they're going to have the most expensive backup QB in the league for a couple of years, I think. Look, I don't know if Winston is going to come in and be the savior of the franchise or the answer for them, but we've seen guys like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, this is now Winston's third or fourth chance, but come back after a rough patch where they were really hyped up to be the special QB and it just never quite panned out. I don't know if that's going to happen for Winston because the Browns are just such a dumpster fire of an organization that I don't think they could foster that like some of these other teams have. But no, they definitely need out of the Watson contract. They're not going to. It's going to hurt their team for years. But they should at least try their hand with Winston or someone else at quarterback there.
Yeah, it's really surprising. I understand when you get trapped by a contract. Doesn't mean you need to play him. I get you're paying for him and he might be an expensive backup like you just said, but to put this guy on the field and play as bad as he has, I don't care how much money he's making, you gotta go with someone else. And you can use money as an excuse all you want. You're not winning games. What's the difference? Put him on the bench. Let him think about how terrible he is, because there's just no avoiding it at this point. It's really funny because we were watching Grace likes to watch trash TV. But we were watching this show and he came on to buy a house. And I'm like, oh, he's garbage.
Selling Sunsets. I know exactly what episode you're talking about.
Yeah, I was in tears. This guy is superstar. He's a far cry from his days when he was in Houston and all the legal troubles that he ran into. But for real, he's so bad, and I just can't fathom why they keep putting him on the field. It's kind of I understand this a little bit more, but kind of why the Patriots keep putting Brissett on the field, he's accomplishing something. Granted, he's behind an offensive line that is made of Swiss cheese.
I think, the Patriots are protecting Drake May, whereas the Browns are they've just shot themselves in the foot 1,000 times in a row and have no other choice but to continue limping on. I feel bad for that fan base.
They have a choice,
They have a good enough surrounding roster where they should be a competitive team, but without a QB, which they've always done just a horrendous job of evaluating talent or just
they had a QB. they let him go for this garbage.
I know.
All right. Next take here. The Vikings are the team to beat and arguably the best team in the NFC. They are the last remaining unbeaten team that is not the Chiefs in the entire league, and they're sitting at 5-0 currently.
When I saw this note, I wanted to look through the NFC to try to argue you on this, but I just couldn't. I think that the Lions are a good team, but if I compare them, I think the Vikings have the better defense. I'd be hard pressed to say Goff is better than Darnold, especially with how they're playing right now. Goff had a good week, but Darnold's had a fantastic year so far. Their weapons, Aaron Jones got banged up, but he's been great. Justin Jefferson's doing Justin Jefferson-esque things. Addison's there. Hawkinson hasn't played yet, but he's going to come back soon. I think it would be hard to make an argument that any team in the NFC, maybe other than the Commanders or Lions, which I did not expect these three teams to be in the conversation this early on, it would be hard to say someone is better than the Vikings right now in the NFC.
It shows you how important a quarterback is. Sam Darnold's just really meshed well in the Vikings, and he's obviously got that talent around him. But you put Jaden Daniels on the Commanders, which was really the biggest change that they made, and they're a whole new element. Like he's a guy that commands the entire game, and he's been really, really fun to watch. The crazy thing is, man, they're the leading scoring offense in the league. The Commanders. Defense, not so great. It's not the worst defense, but it's not nearly as good. But they're sitting at 155 points on the season, and they just show no signs of slowing down. And they're the only team in the NFC East with a positive ratio right now, which is really crazy. It's an interesting league right now because if you look at the NFC and you're looking for teams that are going to stand out, you look at all the different divisions, you can't pull anyone out you're just like, yeah, let's go. This is it. The Vikings have been and have performed across the board. They have the second most points in the NFC scored, but their defense has only allowed 76 points, and they're the second best defense in the NFC in terms of points allowed.
Well, you could just see it. Like Brian Flores, I know obviously he developed a little bit of a reputation in Miami, but that hurt him a bit. But
yeah,
he has been, I think, far and away the best defensive coordinator in the league this year. Mm-hmm. You could just see like veteran QBs like Aaron Rodgers are getting like completely confused by the defensive fronts thrown in front of them, and they're throwing picks, they're taking sacks, they never know who's coming and who's backing into coverage. It's really kind of fun to watch, and if you have a good defense, you have a good QB, you have good weapons, you have a great coach, and we know the Vikings have a great coaching staff. Mm-hmm. It's hard to see a way where they fall off the cliff this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch the rest of the season with this, which leads me to the next surprise. Or maybe it's not a surprise. Maybe it was just took a few. Your dog is guest starring. Is Caleb Williams figuring it out? Has it finally started to click? I'm not saying he's playing lights out. Jaden Daniels has definitely performed better than he has, especially with what's around him. But the Bears have looked pretty good as I'm watching them. Their defense has obviously been really good for the majority of the season and shutting a lot of things down. But it seems like the offense is finally getting on schedule.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for the Bears and Caleb Williams right now is they've had a run game the past 2 weeks. That's massive for a rookie QB. When opposing defenses know that you can't run the ball and they could just back up in the coverage, throw blitzes at you, bring pressure, it is tough for a rookie QB to thrive in that league, especially when your O-line is suspect at best. So I think that if Swift can keep this up, the O-line has improved since the first 2 weeks and can maintain that, I think he'll be in a much better spot rest of the year.
Yeah, that was the biggest concern, and they've done a lot better the last 2 weeks than they have. It's been fun to watch him adjust. I might actually be in a position where maybe I'll start him again, as I've had him just sitting on my bench after the first 2 weeks of horrible play. But we'll see. Time will tell. And then my last topic that I have here for us to discuss, and I can't wrap my head around it. The Jets. I know it's the Jets, so like you go into each season, you're just like, it's the Jets. They're just going to be trash no matter how you spin it. They're going to have a good defense, and their offense is going to be anemic. With Aaron Rodgers there, and considering like Aaron Rodgers has not played terrible, he's played okay. He's played good. Maybe not up to like what we're used to from like Aaron Rodgers of old in terms of like turnovers and stuff, but he's not the problem. It's been fascinating because I think their biggest issue is their rushing game has just been arguably the worst in the league, and I can't put heads or tails on. All I know is I'm regretting drafting Breece Hall in my one league because he's been really, really, really bad. And he's being outdone by Braylon Allen, the rookie, in terms of like yards per carry and just about every aspect of the game. To the point that like Allen's eating into his playtime a little bit. And he shouldn't be. There is no scenario where Braylon Allen should be taking any time away from Breece Hall. You would think going into the season. But with the way things have panned out from Breece Hall, and just real quick, and then I'll let you jump in and give your thoughts. He's coming off this past week where he had 9 carries for 23 yards for a whopping 2.6. Last week we discussed this in our how we did before. 10 carries for 4 yards last week. And he's only had 1 week where he's averaged more than 4 yards per carry, and that was week 2 when he averaged 4.4. He hasn't been good. And the thing is like he's not getting catches either.
Yeah. And that was the thing that we were hoping would save Breece, just like the reception volume there, the passing volume. And I think the Jets, they're the Jets. You should never be surprised when the Jets are terrible or don't meet expectations. That's like the one thing they are consistent at is missing expectations. Even when they're terrible, they somehow underperform low expectations. But I think with them, a lot of it comes down to, Robert Saleh is not an offensive coach. He's not a very good coach.
It's showing.
Maybe he could be a defensive coordinator somewhere in the league, but he's never, in his entire coaching career with the Jets, produced, like a top 15, top 20 offense even, I want to say.
Well, he had Zach Wilson as the QB, so...
Oh, right, but still... It's their offense is not good. Their coaching isn't great. Their O-line is still weak. They didn't really address it that much this offseason, a little bit, but even then they have some aging veterans on there. I don't know. They're the Jets. What can you say?
Yeah, it's just really confusing. I was hoping they'd turn a corner here. This season we'd see something a little bit more. Not that they're in a bad spot in this league right now. Sitting at 2-3 is like looking at the majority of the league, which is mind-boggling in itself. But it's just interesting to see. I was hoping obviously to see more out of Garrett Wilson this year, which he finally had a good game this past week. But it's just been dog crap to watch.
It took 22 targets to put up those numbers.
Yeah. It's not good. Okay, let's jump into just a quick blurb on some injury news because it wouldn't be a week in the NFL without some of our players going down. Fortunately, not a ton, or unfortunately, if you have these players. One would be Njoku. He just came back from an injury and injured himself again. He's getting an MRI on his knee, so we're waiting to see what happens there. Devon Achane. This is out again with a concussion. He's going into a bye week, so he might not miss any time, which is good news. Hopefully he'll be good, and there's a chance after that week that Tua might be coming back, depending where he is. They're saying he's symptom-free. So we'll see. Maybe the Dolphins will come back off their bye week and get their crap together. But Achane again, guys, this is drafting small dudes. He's in his second season, and you can tell he is super injury-prone. Not that you could predict a concussion. Getting trucked in the head is never a good thing, and it's obviously not intentional or something that's going to happen often, but he's clearly one that gets hurt. Next, my boy, so sad, Nico Collins. Off to a great start. I'm like, sweet, we're going to have a monster Nico Collins week again. And he puts up his touchdown and then leaves the game pretty much. He's got a hammy injury. Don't know the extent of the injury. We just know that he's currently listed as day-to-day. The concern here is he could miss some time. They don't know how long he's going to be out right now. And everyone who has ever watched football knows how hamstring injuries can be. Sam, I'm sorry. Just look at A.J. Brown. Hamstring injury, week 1, has not played since. Hoping he comes back this upcoming week, but they have not said whether or not he'll be back. Hammies are very fickle, and we can never really cleanly determine when they're going to be back outside of them running routes the week leading up, and they're pain-free. And then the last injury, Aaron Jones. I was upset because it pretty much sealed the deal that I lost by 1 game because he got hurt and ended up leaving when he was starting out so good. He left with a hip injury. I shouldn't be surprised. It's Aaron Jones, and he's just at that stage where he's going to have an injury every year practically, and he's having an MRI today too on October 7th. So we'll hopefully have some information on him. The good news with Aaron Jones though is he's on a bye week next week too. So if it's nothing too bad, there's a good chance he might not miss any time. We just got to wait and see what happens. All right. Let's move us into our review of the studs and duds. But I figure real quick, as we jump into this section, which is always a fun section for us, I was taking a hard look at different stats. Just in passing and rushing and receiving and so on. And I thought it would just be fun to have a quick conversation based on who the top 10 QBs are right now. Because if you look at the top 10 QB list, I don't think it's what people thought it would be. Whether you are in Dynasty or in Redraft, it has not panned out how drafts went. And barring a few, which some you would expect, like QB1 Lamar Jackson. That's not surprising. He was going top 3 in most drafts. It's interesting because you take QB1 with Lamar Jackson averaging 23.3 points per game. That's good play. There are currently only 6 QBs averaging 20 or more points per game. And the only 2 in that top 6 that were going in the first few rounds are Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen's averaging 20.8, Lamar Jackson averaging 23.3. Jalen Hurts isn't far off, sitting at number 8, averaging 18.4. And then if you go down a little bit further, you see some of the other people that were in that spot. C.J. Stroud, Joe Burrow are in the low teens. So it's an interesting thing to look at when you got someone like Jaden Daniels at QB2. Baker Mayfield, who's having a fantastic year, sitting at QB3. And then Jordan Love, who was going, I guess, in about the 3rd round in most leagues, I think, or the end of the 2nd, is sitting at 21.3. And when I say these rounds, guys, I'm talking Dynasty. Like, he's not going in those rounds in redraft. I hope.
No, I mean, it just goes to show you, unless you get one of those elite QBs that have a massive rushing upside like Allen or Lamar, it's typically better just to wait. Unless, of course, you're in like a Superflex Dynasty League, which we are in ourselves in a few. A lot of times those QB streamers end up outperforming like the pocket passers of the world that are, I don't know, the Rodgers, the Goffs, whoever it might be.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And if you look at running backs, it's a scenario where there's only 5 running backs averaging 20 plus a game. That's one crazy already. Okay. If you look at those 5, you want to know how many of them are going in the first first round, first 2 rounds in most drafts?
I'm guessing the only one drafted there was Saquon. Kamara probably wasn't drafted in the first 2 rounds. Maybe Jonathan Taylor? I don't know how he's been doing. No?
Jonathan Taylor is RB8. He's at 18.1. So not bad from where he was going. He's usually going like RB6.
Is it just Saquon and Kyron Williams?
Yep. So we got Alvin Kamara's number 1, sitting at 26.7. Called it. Just saying. Called it. Kenneth Walker is RB2 at 26.3. Saquon is 3 at 23.5. Derrick Henry is right after him. So in some leagues, he's probably going in the top 3 rounds, possibly. So he's a possibility. He came in at 23.4, and then it's Williams at RB5 at 20.4. And those are the 5 that are over 20 points. And to round out the top 10, you have Aaron Jones, RB6. Jordan Mason, who's had a really good rookie year, all things considered. Jonathan Taylor, coming in at 18.1. Joe Mixon, which is, can't really say much. He only played a game and a half. David Montgomery is sitting there at 10. So Montgomery's ahead of Gibbs by actually, where is Gibbs? Gibbs is RB17. Montgomery is RB10. And removing Joe Mixon, the next one is HN at 16.8. Like, that's absolutely crazy to me. And let's jump into receiving just real quick, and then we'll get into our studs and duds. Let me filter this real quick. Guess how many receivers are averaging more than 20 points a game?
I'm going to say you have Neighbors. I think you have Jamar Chase.
No.
No, Jamar Chase isn't. I thought maybe the
Granted, this doesn't have this past week.
Oh, it doesn't have this past week.
Yeah, that has not up because the week's not over yet.
I'm going to say like less than like 4.
It's 4.
Okay. Nico's one, right?
Yeah. You should be able to guess them.
Nico, Neighbors. Is Jefferson over 20? No. Jefferson's over 20?
There's one more. He just got crushed by his quarterback last week.
Rashee Rice. Poor guy.
So, wide receiver 1 is Neighbors, 22.9. Nico Collins is wide receiver 2 at 22.7. Rashee Rice was 21.6. Justin Jefferson is literally 20 on the dot. And then Kupp is at 19.9. Wide receiver 6 is Jaden Reed at 19.4. Then you got Amon-Ra, 19.1. Juwan Jennings, all because of one game, 18.9. DK Metcalf, who's had a good year, 18.1. And then Chris Godwin at 17.8. Then you have, just to round this out real quick, Drake London at 17.1 because he just had monster week, so he'll be coming up. Diggs at 17, he'll be dropping because his points were lower. Devontae Smith is 13, and then Chase is at 14, and CD's at 15. 16.8 and 16.7. These are guys that were going in the first round. Chase, CD, those two, obviously Jefferson, we know that one's going up in the first round. Amon-Ra is going first round. He's still sitting in that position. It's really interesting to look at this because the movement of how people have performed, it's kind of alarming. Like Tyreek Hill is wide receiver 32. Now I understand it's because he lost Tua, but it's still like he was going off the board at 1 or 2 in some leagues.
Yeah, I know. The one league I have him in is not a league I'm doing well in. I'll just put it that way. And I have Nico in that league too, so it'll be a rough go.
And I'll just take a quick peek at tight ends. We'll drop this one. We'll do this one really quick. How many tight ends are averaging more than 10 points?
10 points?
Yeah, we're lowering the bar pretty drastically because that's how bad tight ends have been this year.
I still want to say maybe 4 or 5.
It's 5.
5?
It's sitting at 5. It's actually really crazy to look at this. TE1 is Kittle. Understandable. He's had a good year.
Yeah. Is Kraft in there?
No.
No. Well,
Granted, again, this doesn't include this past week.
Yeah.
So that might change. Kittle is 1. Goddard is 2. Then it's Bowers at 3. And then it's Jake Ferguson at 4. And then Cole Kmet.
Yeah, we can just get past the tight ends. No one cares.
It's crazy, man. I wish this had more Week 5 data, but it doesn't. It's like just not loaded at all in here. So we'll have that. Hopefully, I think that we're going to obviously see a shift because some people have big weeks this past week. But okay, let's jump into our studs and duds real quick. Sam, you want to kick us off with the QBs?
Yeah, for QBs, our first stud of the week was obviously Kirk Cousins. He threw for over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, and put up 35.4 fantasy points. Just a monster week, and it's good to see him back. It seemed like he's starting to shake off any of the rust associated with being out for a year with the Achilles injury. Obviously, we're seeing a huge lift to guys like Drake London and Darnell Mooney. And even Kyle Pitts kind of came back from the dead. So, good performance. I'm hoping the Falcons can keep this up because we need more fantasy-relevant teams in the NFC.
Yeah.
As for our other QB stud, he wasn't the highest scorer. I think he was QB 7 or 8 this week. But it was Caleb Williams, who we mentioned earlier in the video. It just seems like he's starting to put it together a little bit. He hit DJ Moore for a pair of touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown called back due to penalties, but he looked much better, and I think he's going to be a startable fantasy QB moving forward. As for the duds, these two guys probably weren't drafted in the vast majority of leagues, but they've quickly become very fantasy relevant. But this week was a dud week for Sam Darnold. He's playing against the Jets, so it's a good defense. It was in London, so there's always some weird results in like the London series. But he only put up 5.3 points. Didn't throw for any touchdowns this week was the big thing. I think he looked good for most of it. Like he had a few bad errors in there, but at the end of the game, he still looked decent. Like I don't think he like turned back into being good old Jets Sam Darnold for us.
That's just a bad game.
Yeah, I think he'd be fine. The other guy is Andy Dalton. Panthers got absolutely shut down by the Bears. And Dalton's fantasy points followed along at 4.7.
Yeah, we called that. If you look at our start set, we pretty much said you shouldn't be starting any Panther. I was foolish and did it myself, which we'll get into. I'm going to jump into running backs here. And first one, Tank Bigsby. Came in at 25.9 points in PPR. Dude had some really, really long runs yesterday. He just had a really good game overall. I will highlight this while we were sitting here recording. I just got a notification that ETN was hurt, which is why you didn't see him. Apparently, he got popped pretty bad, and he's dealing with a shoulder injury right now. I literally just got the notification while I was sitting here. That's why I was kind of drifting to the side there looking at it. They don't know if he's going to miss any time yet, but hopefully it's nothing serious because I need him. People were confused because ETN was actually having a good game, and he just disappeared. So that answers that. Does not take away from Bigsby's performance. It was great to see. He's really, after last year where people were just like, this guy's clearly not going to do anything, it's been nice to see him come out and perform at the level that he has. Next for RB, we have DeAndre Swift, which is definitely one we will touch on in our start sit video review. We said you should start him. He came in for 20 points, and he got robbed of a touchdown. He got robbed, technically 2 touchdowns, yeah. Roshan Johnson came in and stole a TD from him after there was a penalty on the offensive line where he didn't get his TD to count. He proceeded to rush the ball to the 1 after that, and then they subbed him out for Roshan for the Vulture Johnson to come in and steal his touchdown, which did not make me happy. And then it happened again later in the game. So I was pretty upset watching that because I think he could have had a 30 spot, and I'm sure you would have appreciated a 30 spot. Duds. I don't know. This is what we're talking about when we're just going through those fantasy lists. Each of these guys were arguably RB 1 and 2 in most drafts. Bijan Robinson, 10.7. Breece Hall, 6.7. As we said earlier, these guys have not performed at the level. With the Atlanta offense going off as it did this past week, you would think Bijan would have been a bigger part of that. but for some reason they still cannot get checkdowns to this guy. Like, let the guy get out into the field and run, because that's where he's really, really good. But they just can't seem to do it. That doesn't take away from Atlanta's performance overall. Obviously, they had a really good offensive week. And then Breece Hall is just like, he just can't get anything going. It's actually really sad to watch.
Yeah, and I really hope that Hall and Robinson turn it around. They're obviously both drafted in like the top 6 of most leagues that they're in.
Yeah, don't remind me.
Just disappointing right now, but the talent, at least for Bijan, still seems like it's there. Breece seems like he's losing ground to Braylon Allen, which is not great for his fantasy owners, but we'll see how that goes. As for wide receivers, our studs for the week, we did 2 pairs. The first pair were the Bengals wide receiver duo of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They both had monster performances. Chase put up 41.3 points and Higgins put up 29.3. This was a bit of a shootout with the Ravens, so I'm not expecting this every week, but it was good to see the Bengals offense kind of come back to life a little bit. Joe Burrow looked like the same guy it was 2 years ago when he was just slinging it from the pocket before he got all those injuries.
Yep.
Chase, obviously, automatic start every single week. Higgins might be a little bit more matchup dependent, but it was good to see him get those touchdowns and red zone work. So you're probably starting him in your flex most weeks if you have him. As for our other wide receiver pair, this is directly tied to Kirk Cousins, again, having a monster week. We had Drake London, who is the obvious one. If you drafted him, you drafted him in like your top 2 or 3 rounds, depending on format, and you're starting him every week, as you should be. But Darnell Mooney is kind of the surprising one. It seems pretty clear that Kirk really trusts Darnell Mooney in big situations.
Yeah, 2 different games.
Yeah, and he's been doing fantastic. It's not just a one-off game, and I think he kind of is developing that like Adam Thielen type relationship with Kirk Cousins a little bit. I like them both the rest of the season. I think London's automatic start. Mooney's more situational flex player, but not a bad player to have in either scenario there.
No, he's having a really, really good year, man. He's got, 17.8, 14.6, 8.6, and then 31.5. He's a consistent option right now, sitting at wide receiver 15. So in most leagues, he's a wide receiver too, which is not something I thought I'd ever say about Darnell Mooney with how his career has gone. Okay, I'm going to jump into tight ends. Weird tight end week. There was like a few outstanding performances, and then like every tight end kind of was just around the mean of what you'd expect from a tight end. But we did have some really standout ones, and the first one goes to Tucker Kraft, who put up a nice 24.8 points, which is why I lost one of my leagues. And literally, it was Tucker Kraft. He's going to be the whole reason that I lose. And then the other one is Brock Bowers, coming in at 23.7. The rookie is doing everything that we expected him to do with an iffy quarterback situation. I'll tell you one thing. What I've learned is that Pierce is a dick. He's not a good coach. He's just throwing people under the bus all over the place. I was watching him today. He's like, we're going to have to go back and review the QB room and all these things. He's saying this out loud. Yeah. How to make your players hate you across the board. Easy.
Yeah, the only thing with Bowers is I'm a little more concerned with Aiden O'Connell at QB than I am with Gardner. Minshew, while maybe not accurate, at least as a gunslinger, I feel less that way about Aiden O'Connell, so he might come down a little bit in coming weeks, but he'll also be the only option there if Devontae's gone.
Yes, and that's the other thing, like his whole interaction with Devontae Adams. I'm like, what is going on in the Raiders locker room? I don't know. It's mind blowing. I'm going to give a little special shout out because I actually started Kyle Pitts this week, and dealing with his crap this whole season, he put up almost 16 points. All right, we only have one dud because as we said most tight ends were kind of around their mean. We couldn't really pick out someone who performed really bad except Dalton Kincaid, which is pretty much a staple for the entire season for Dalton Kincaid.
And
He has not been very good the majority of the year. He's only got 1 week where he's over double-digit points. So, I mean, that doesn't say a ton. The tight end position has not been great. But for someone like Kincaid who's going TE1, TE2 in most drafts, that performance is not... He's being outperformed by Kyle Pitts, who had a donut 1 week.
Shakir was out. Keon Coleman was really the only target competition. I know. And the Bills had to throw the ball. They weren't winning most of the game against a good Texans team. If this is the kind of performance he puts up in that scenario, is like he might have a few good weeks in there where maybe he hauls in a touchdown or has one big play, but it's going to be tough to consistently rely on him in your starting lineup.
Yeah, it's really crazy to watch. I mean, you still don't have a choice. He's TE11 right now. That's how bad the TE position is. When you got people that you expect to be top performers just not where they need to be, it's really funny because I'm like looking at some of these guys and I have a lot of these tight ends like on my bench. Like Freiermuth is TE7 and he's sitting on my bench in one of these. I'm not starting. I'm starting Bowers over him, so there's no scenario. But it's just like you see the people that you expect performances from. And we'll see how Kelsey does this week. We'll see if he continues his trend with Rice out with what he did last week. But the TE, this might be one of the worst years for TE performance that I've seen in like recent history.
Probably got to go back to like the Antonio Gates era where it was him and no one else.
Like, so, you know what? If we look at average, just average. So last year in 2023, there was 11 tight ends that averaged 10 or more points. No tight ends averaged more than 15. If you look at 2024, we only have one tight end averaging more than 14 points. Just one. And if we look at, let's do 2022, just for funsies. There was only one tight end averaging more than 15 points, and that was Kelsey in 2022. Kittle was at 13, Hockenson was at 12.7, Andrews was at 12.7, and Goddard was TE5 in 2022 at 11.8. It's really weird to like see some of this, and then you go back to 2021, and it's Kelsey and Andrews 1 and 2, and they're each over 15 points. Gronk was there, Kittle's there, they're all over 14. But this year's performance is the worst one that I've seen. They got 13 tight ends over 10 in 2021. We have only 8 tight ends over 10 in 2022. And then we had 10 in 2023, as I mentioned. So it's a fall off because we're only at 7, which is the lowest out of any of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know if it's just tight ends are blocking more or if the league has just shifted. I mean, I know we're seeing a scenario where like Laporta is not doing anything. But I don't know. It's interesting to look at, man.
I really can't put a finger on it. You'd think with the too high safety looks that most defenses are throwing there, kind of restricting like the big over-the-top plays, you'd think the underneath work of like slot guys like Amon-Ra or JSN or even tight ends would increase. And we are seeing that with the slot wide receiver roles. We're seeing like big games from like Wan'Dale Robinson and Josh Downs and even like guys like that. But we're just not seeing it with tight end production right now, which is a strange thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Obviously, you know, Evan Ingram's been out most of the year. We'd probably see more from him if he was playing. Laporta is not doing anywhere near to what he was doing last year. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season pans out. Obviously, we're only at week 5. We're not even. We just passed the quarter mark, and now we're heading for the halfway point. I'm curious to see how the rest of this year looks. It's going to be fun to watch. But on that note, we will wrap this one up, guys. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And we will see you in the Start Sit video that we will get out on Wednesday or Thursday.